Welcome to the fire and fury of Metropolitan Stadium in Bloomington, Minnesota, where the Vikings and the 49ers met to determine who would play the Dallas Cowboys for the NFC Championship. In Minnesota, this was known as a perfect day for football. Clear, crisp, and a pleasant 8 degrees above zero. Just what the doctor didn't order for the Vikings' enemy from the balmy Bay Area of San Francisco. Bud Grant's Minnesota Vikings reached the playoffs without much of an offense this season. True, quarterback Gary Quazza was hurt late in the year, but even when healthy, it was the highly touted Viking defense that had been their best offense, often scoring or setting up more points than the offense. Led by mustachioed Jim Marshall and All-Pro Carl Eller, it was this defense that hoped to lead the Vikings to the Super Bowl again, a defense that had yielded an average of 11 points per game in regular season play. The San Francisco 49ers, led by Coach Dick Nolan, have finally struck gold after 25 years of frustration. And unlike Minnesota, it has been their offense, and in particular, the NFC's MVP, John Brodie, that has led the way. Brodie has always done well statistically, but in 1970 he has had more opportunity to do his thing because of a reincarnated 49er defense that Coach Nolan has worked hard to perfect. Brodie has with him both runners who can receive and receivers who can run, and this has helped him enjoy his finest of 14 years as a pro. So it was the NFC's best offense against the NFC's best defense in a classic confrontation of strength against strength. Would the 49ers leave their game as well as their hearts in San Francisco? Or would their prolific offense fry the Viking muscle men in frostbitten Minnesota? I'm Jack Whitaker, and this is the NFL Game of the Week, the 49ers against the Vikings. The Vikings had first possession and immediately were able to run on the 49ers. This was their plan, and Clint Jones, number 26, went around and through the 49er defense in the first 2 plays of the game. Quarterback Gary Quazza wanted to mix this running with long passes to his wide receivers, Gene Washington and John Henderson. He stuck to this strategy all day, but this bomb to Henderson was one of the few that would work. From the 49er 9, however, watch number 57, middle linebacker Frank Nunley, key on Clint Jones and stop him cold as the 49ers began to negate Minnesota's offensive strength. So Quazza sent Jones out of the backfield on a short flare, but the results were disastrous. Linebacker Jim Snydecki's interception was the first break of the game in what many thought would be an error-free contest. But many were wrong as Ken Willard fumbled on the 49ers' second play from scrimmage. Safety Paul Krause picked it up and took it in. The mighty Vikings defense had once again been their best offense and had given them a 7-0 pad to work on early, the key to so many Viking victories. It looked like momentum was with Minnesota now as the Purple People Eaters continued to show the 49ers how to play defense. But Brodie stuck to his plan, a mixture of runs, short flips to his backs, and sideline patterns to his wide receivers, Gene Washington and number 88, Dick Witcher. Brodie's beautiful play-action fakes held the front four just long enough to give him the extra time with which to do so. Although the Vikings had the best pass defense in the NFC, Brodie led the NFC's best passing offense, and he was determined to throw a lot against Minnesota. Having set up the Vikings secondary perfectly with short passes, Brodie went for Gene Washington deep and hit him. But the stylish second-year receiver fumbled, and again Minnesota's defense had come up with a big play to stifle San Francisco. It was to be their last big play of the game. The rest of the first quarter saw a number of near misses for Minnesota, both offensively and defensively. Ed Shirachman had a near interception on the next 49er series, but Witcher helped prevent it. On offense, Quazzo kept trying to bomb the 49ers, but his receivers were having trouble with the sun, the cold, and the 49er defenders. Quazzo's protection, too, was having trouble. Watch the 49ers right end, rookie Cedric Hardman, number 86, break down his block and sack Quazzo, forcing a punting situation. And from our end zone camera, watch the wall of 49er blockers on the punt. Then watch rookie Bruce Taylor, number 44, as he moves through this alley 30 yards to the Viking 23, aided by a key block from number 82, Ted Kwolek. Two plays later, John Brody spotted Dick Witcher all alone in the end zone, and San Francisco had tied the score in a flash. On a repeat of the score, watch the flawless protection Brody received from his outstanding line as he sent Witcher to the slippery part of the field where the receiver always has the advantage. The exciting first quarter was about over, and the game was tied at 7. We'll be right back with more exciting action on the NFL Game of the Week. Just before the second quarter began, the Vikings began to roll as Dave Osborne, number 41, ripped off what was to be the longest run of the game, 22 yards. But with the change in quarters came a change in momentum as the 49ers defense contained the run once again. Led by number 53, Tommy Hart, and cornerback Bruce Taylor, Jones and Osborne could go nowhere as the 49ers continually forced Quazzo into third and long situations. Bruce Taylor today was truly magnificent. In addition to his punt returning, he defensed Gene Washington and the Viking receivers like an all-pro, sticking to them like saran wrap to a kumquat. Boston U, known more for its long hair than for its football, has given the NFL a rookie superstar by the name of Bruce Taylor. Taylor's heroics forced a field goal attempt by the NFL's leading scorer, Fred Cox. But even he could not help as his 33-yard attempt failed. The 49er offense, too, was unable to do much for the rest of the half, although Ken Willard's running kept the Vikings' front four from blowing in on Brody. But for most of the half, Eller, Larson, Marshall, and number 88, All-Pro Alan Page, lived up to their reputation of the most fearsome of the fearsome foursomes. What kept the Vikings in trouble was not their defense. It was their inability to move and their inability to hold on to the ball. They would fumble 3 times in the half, twice on this series. The second, recovered by the 49ers' Stan Hindman, set up San Francisco's last score of the half, a 40-yard field goal from the right leg of Bruce Gossett to make it 10-7, San Francisco. Gossett, who had been acquired from Los Angeles for Kermit Alexander, has helped the 49ers immeasurably with his three-pointers and his well-placed kickoffs, keeping the ball away from the Vikings' deep receivers. Bill Brown took this one back to the 40, however, and Minnesota had good field position with 2 minutes left in the half. But Quazzo could do nothing. In his defense, his receivers were not helping. Neither were his runners. Clint Jones' second fumble was recovered by 49er safety Mel Phillips, and with a minute and a half left, John Brody would try to get some insurance. He began well by utilizing reserve tight end Ted Kwolek. A clutch catch by Kwolek took it to the Vikings' 13. But the 49ers suffered a major penalty, and Brody was off target on a 3rd and 25 situation. Again, a near theft by number 45, Ed Frozen Fingers Sharachman. So Gossett was again brought in, but the Vikings' Carl Eller got a hand on his 35-yard attempt. Although the 49ers came up empty on this drive, the half ran out, with San Francisco holding a 10-7 lead over mighty Minnesota. The Vikings, however, were far from through. A lack of offense and fumbleitis had hurt them badly, but the blocked field goal had given them momentum as they entered the locker room at the half to talk things over. The second half began with the San Francisco 49ers holding a 10-7 edge over the Minnesota Vikings. As they took the field, both teams hoped their offenses would thaw a bit in the 8-degree weather that had contributed to a total of 7 fumbles. But defense was to dominate the third period. The famed Minnesota muscle men completely cut off the 49er running game with their great lateral pursuit. Early in the quarter, they finally got to John Brody when Alan Page ran him down for an 8-yard loss. It was the first time the Vikings sacked Brody today, and it was the last time the Vikings sacked Brody today. But they pressured him so hard that 3 of his passes were blocked at the line of scrimmage in the third quarter alone. This virtuoso performance by one of football's greatest defensive platoons was no surprise. But what was startling to Minnesota was that the San Francisco defense was matching them tackle for tackle. Cedric Hardman, Stan Heineman, Bill Belk, Charlie Kruger, Dave Wilcox, Roland Lakes, and Frank Nunley simply swarmed over anything that wore purple. Gary Quazzo was harassed so brutally that at the quarter's end he had completed only 4 of 18 passes. With one exception, every offensive series for both teams in the quarter ended in a punt. There were 7 in all. The one that didn't was an interception by Bruce Taylor. So the final period began with the score still 10-7. Then, for the first time, some offense reared its head. The 49ers started it with an end around by Ted Kwolek. On the next play, John Brody speared the former Penn State All-American with a pass at the right sideline. Kwolek has only recently come into his own and is finally paying dividends as a #1 draft pick. The San Francisco attack seemed to have found some spark, and this was confirmed when Brody hit Bill Tucker in the flat. Tucker, showing good individual effort, made the play go for 19 yards. But just as they were moving, the 8th fumble and 10th turnover in the game occurred. The victim was Tucker. The tackler was Wally Hilgenberg, and the culprit was the ubiquitous Paul Krause, who returned the gift 12 yards. The Vikings had the first big break of the second half deep in San Francisco territory. Then came one of the key plays of the game. On third down, well within comfortable field goal range, Quazzo was trapped by Hardman, then finished off by Edwards and Hart for a big loss. Fred Cox, who has kicked more field goals this year than anyone, had said before the game that low temperatures like today's make a kicker lose 5 to 10 yards a kick. His theory just might be true, for Cox barely missed from the 43. We'll be right back with more exciting action on the NFL Game of the Week. Still ahead by 3, San Francisco was forced to punt on their next series, and Steve Spurrier from the Minnesota 40 lofted a beauty. It took a perfect bounce and was down on the Viking 1-yard line. Now the Vikings were within the shadow of their own end zone, and they had to vacate the premises quickly. Their performances so far today gave no reason for optimism. Quazzo, with good protection, went for the bomb far upfield to Gene Washington, but it was overthrown and almost intercepted by Jimmy Johnson. On third down, the Viking quarterback threw a bullet to Jim Lindsay in the clear, but it was dropped. Minnesota had failed to improve their field position again. On fourth down, Tom McNeil had to punt from deep inside his end zone. The kick was good enough, but Rookie of the Year candidate Bruce Taylor burned the Vikings again. His 23-yard return gave his team the ball at the Minnesota 14. If the Vikings have a weakness, it is their specialty teams. Opponents returned 3 kickoffs and 1 punt for touchdowns against them this season. And Taylor, the NFC's leading punt returnee, was just the man to further exploit the weakness. Ken Willard, who would lead all rushers today, slammed his way to the 1-yard line, and San Francisco had a 1st and goal at the 1, with less than 3 minutes left. 2 plays later, the NFL's leading quarterback followed his center over the goal line for the cherished score. His team was in front 17-7, and there was only 1 minute 20 seconds to go. Minnesota had to score fast, then get the ball back again. It looked impossible when Cedric Hardman leveled Quazzo for a loss. It was now 4th and 13, and Quazzo, who was not having one of his finer games, had one more chance. He completed the pass over the middle to Bob Grimm, and the Vikings had their first down on the San Francisco 42. A repeat of this important play from our isolated camera shows that despite a brush with a defensive back, Grimm had plenty of room to run his pattern. The 49er defense was hanging back to prevent a long gain, but once Grimm caught the ball, they came up fast and stopped him from getting out of bounds to halt the clock. Minnesota was forced to use a timeout, and with 27 seconds left, Quazzo passed again to Grimm, this time for 18 yards to the 49er 24. But once again, Grimm failed to get out of bounds, and his teammates desperately tried to get off another play without using their last timeout. They were unable to do so, and even more valuable time was wasted before the signal was given. Now, just 7 seconds remained in the ball game. Minnesota got its score as Gene Washington made a fine play in the end zone, shielding Bruce Taylor away from the ball. His touchdown catch brought the Vikings to within 3 points of the 49ers, but there was only 1 second remaining. Minnesota's impossible dream ended when Fred Cox's onside kick was covered by rookie Bob Hoskins. The Cinderella 49ers had overcome their own adversity to beat the mighty Minnesota Vikings. The great victory ended a quarter-century of frustration for the San Francisco organization. They have come close many times, but until today have never made it to an NFL championship. The Norsemen, who had won 14 consecutive games at Metropolitan Stadium, fled from the scene of the crime. Their chances at revenge for last year's Super Bowl defeat were shattered. The image of their great defense remained intact, however, for even in defeat, they had been superb. However, the Minnesota offense was as ice cold as the Minnesota weather, and in the final analysis, this made the difference for the Vikings. Today, Coach Bud Grant may well have needed the incendiary qualities of a guy named Cap. For San Francisco, the heroes were many. A great offensive line, one of the premier quarterbacks in the game, and those twin targets of their young coach, depth and defense. That they were accomplished is evidenced by the fact that next week, ancient Kezar Stadium will be resurrected for the final time. The old girl will be going out in style with a championship team in a title game.